everyone, it's Lisa Vino, and I'm here with Nick Eriks, and we're going to talk ads. Actually, Nick is going to talk ads, and he already has his first question. And if you have a question, pop it into the chat, and we will get to you. Take it away, Nick.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? And basically, we're going to be talking about ads today, and as they more pertain toward romance, since Lease Group is mostly romance authors, so just like specifically what kind of some of the nuances and tactics are that are broadly applicable, I think, a lot of the time, but also more specific to romance. So the first question was, what do I do when Facebook is telling me to combine author interests, basically, and talking about auction overlap and saying, hey, the performance is going to be better if you take these 6 individual authors, maybe in 6 different ad sets or whatever, and combine them together. And should I trust Facebook? The answer to that last question, I can answer pretty succinctly. Definitely not in most instances. However, they are getting better in terms of their kind of recommendations have been based on training their AI for years. So have Google's. And as we all know, we've reached the point where AI has become pretty impressive. And Facebook probably has the most impressive AI products on the market. And that includes their ad system. So they've used all that data to train their AI, which means that in the past, it wasn't particularly great at whatever it was supposed to be doing, whatever kind of like AI assisted thing it was supposed to be doing. Now, a lot of times their suggestions are pretty good. So they're taking control of the audiences in particular, where they're not removing the ability to individually target, but they are leaning toward making it broader, where you just give them a few parameters and then they find people who are similar. So I think that probably the auction overlap thing, if you're getting good performance individually, like if you're happy with the performance, then I wouldn't combine them. Usually you're probably going to have better performance with a somewhat bigger audience at this point. And like, not because of the auction overlap, just because Facebook is designed to work better with larger audiences there. So I wouldn't change anything if the performance is good, but generally speaking, I think it's going to move more toward that broader targeting and away from the kind of micro targeting that was possible on Facebook.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Nick? That's my question, recording people. Because that was one of my scaling strategies, like just use different, like, for example, like use E.L. James, and then I can scale by then adding on another steamy author. That was a scaling strategy that I was using. So that's why I'm asking that question. So like say I was using $50 for the E.L. James audience, and then I want to use another $50 for like a Sylvia Day audience. That to me was me scaling. So I'm guessing now combine Sylvia Day and anybody else into one audience and then just increase that budget?
Yeah. And just for clarification, are you talking about the traffic ads or the sales ads? Because those are different.
I prefer the sales ads, but I am curious to know with traffic.
Okay, so this recommendation is going to come from the traffic side of things. I don't have a ton of data familiarity on the sales ads, so I can't speak to that as much. I think that the sales ads are going to work better in general with a broader targeting, like more audience size, just because Facebook can find the people in that audience who are clicking and taking the action that you want, whether that's adding to cart on your store or converting or whatever. So I think usually that's going to be at least worth trying.
I'm so sorry. Can I pause you for a second? I don't think I've ever gotten this message on a traffic ad. I
Right.
always get this message
Yeah.
when I'm doing sales ads.
Yeah. So like the pixel is really good at finding people who are going to take whatever action you want, whether that's again adding to cart, or I mean it could be view content, or further down the funnel with the checkout or actual purchase. So probably the broader audiences will perform better, and they're definitely worth trying there. With the
Interesting.
traffic ads, I can say that putting all those audiences together is going to be easier to manage from a scaling standpoint, and also generally perform better. So like, for example, you mentioned E.L. James and Sylvia Day. They're probably going to have, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but at least 30% overlap between their audiences. So by combining them, you avoid that audience overlap, and you also just streamline your ads interface a lot, and the ads management, which is really big when it comes to scaling, just because there are a bunch of moving parts there, and there's a lot of stress too with scaling up and potentially spending a lot of money. And it's like, okay, like I have now like 15 or 20 different ad sets to manage individually. Like it cuts down on that, so you can really focus on, hey, what are my numbers, and adjust accordingly. So the romance authors that I start with when targeting, and really for scaling in general. So this is starting out, whether you're spending $5 a day, but you can spend like $500 a day to this audience, no problem. I refer to it as the big six. And the first one is E.L. James. Second is Sylvia Day. Third is Danielle Steele. Fourth is Nora Roberts. Fifth is contemporary romance. And sixth is Diana Gabaldon. And that's contemporary romance, like with contemporary in it, not the big romance novels genre. That doesn't tend to work very well. Contemporary romance is a bit of a smaller interest on Facebook, so that tends to work well. I mean, over the years have seen probably millions of dollars of data going to just that one aggregate audience between the ads that I've run and other people have run, and it's always performed well. With the attribution links now, you can test that against other audiences, and there are some instances where it gets beaten, but it's pretty reliable as a starting point, especially if you're not super comfortable with testing. Anyone out there who's like, I don't know how to read the data, or I'm not sure how to analyze the data at this point, like that's a really good starting point where it's extremely unlikely you target that audience and it just completely sucks. So that's been the starting point for years there, and that works with steamy contemporary romance. A little bit less heat. I think it could probably work with like sweet romance, but I've never tested it there. Like with sweet romance, you could start with something like Debbie Maycomber and Fern Michaels. Like those would be probably what I would start with there. And then it also works with paranormal romance. So for those people who are familiar with Leah's books, which is probably everybody here, right? Like you could use that with something like Alpha's Temptation, or her sci-fi books, like the Draken books, with she co-wrote with Tara Crescent, and the Alpha books are with Renee Rose. So you could use it with books like that as well without any problem. So it's a pretty versatile audience there, and like it streamlines things a lot, where you can literally run like, I mean, I think that there have been instances where I've run $500,000 a day to that audience. That's not going to be sustainable long term, but like for like a launch scenario or something with the traffic ads, that would be fine. So got some questions in the chat. Okay. All right, what's your feeling on open targeting ads? So Facebook's definitely moving toward this. I think that this is a really big question that we're getting a lot. And basically, you know, it's something you gotta test. Okay. That's the answer that I think that people maybe want, maybe they don't want. I'd say probably most people aren't wanting that answer a lot of the time, but that's just the reality with any of these recommendations that you see in courses or emails or books or whatever. That particular recommendation is from a course that people have been joining a lot, so that's why it's suddenly become very popular. It can work in certain instances. It's just something that you have to test. It can really not work. So I'll pull up some data here. Just let me see here. Just so I get it right, I'll read it off. So this is for a book that did like, and this is for, let's see, $1,500+ in spend, so a good sample size. Almost 4,000 clicks, those 3,800 clicks between the audiences tested. So a group of popular authors, this is for a mystery novel, so a group of popular mystery authors, that returned a conversion of 4.1%. Detective fiction returned 2.3%. And then everyone in the UK, because this book is set in the UK, and we're targeting the UK for these ads, that was 1.2%. So we can see that that's not very good. So I would like to tell you that, hey, like, you could just set that and forget it. The closest thing that I found to set it and forget it, and something that you wouldn't have to test, is that big 6 audience at the beginning, because there was literally no way to test it whatsoever when we didn't have attribution links. You were just kind of guessing at the conversion, and that's always been reliable there. So with the open targeting, it's worth testing. I would say with the romance stuff in particular, the big 6 audience tends to perform better, because the romance interests, there are a lot of them, so you have a lot of options starting out. Facebook's changing that with the targeting. They have, I guess it's called advanced detailed targeting now, which is basically they have targeting expansion on. If anyone's familiar with that setting, it's basically like, hey, Facebook takes your audience, but then they can expand it to whoever they want. Kind of is what the gist of what I'm reading in the help document. So you say, hey, I'm targeting E.L. James, and they're like, well, we may target people who like E.L. James, or people who we think are similar to E.L. James, whoever that may be, which I think will work fine with the sales ads. It's an open question how well that's going to work with the traffic ads. One of the things about the traffic ads is that they're one of the worst ad types on Facebook by far. And it just speaks to how good Facebook is as an ad platform, that authors can run traffic ads and be as successful as they are. Like, Facebook's created the best ad platform in the history of humanity. They're really tough to work with as a company, as people know. So I don't say that lightly, or just like throwing that out there as praise for them. It is what it is. So the traffic ads, they're not really designed to be scaled up as high as some people are doing it, like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a day consistently, and not getting back any data on who's converting. Like, because Facebook can't close that loop with the pixel. So it's just one of those things where you're like, wow, like, Facebook's really, really good. So I think that these, to cap that off with the open targeting and targeting in general, I think that those will be beneficial for the sales ads if you're running a direct store, and that bodes well for you going forward. Facebook's done a really impressive job adjusting to the Apple updates, and just with AI in general and the machine learning they're doing, it's crazy how they've been able to adjust, because they were really on the ropes there and struggling to target people. With the traffic ads, we'll see. They may get pretty bad, just with the broad targeting. It's something to keep an eye on performance-wise. Usually when people are like, hey, my ads are not good, the answer is like, you haven't tested any ads recently, or you've tested 2 ads total lifetime, or your settings are wrong, or something like that. I think that it could be the case where the performance isn't great. So just keep an eye on your numbers. Facebook's been making a lot of changes over the past 6 months. There have been more changes on Facebook over the last 6 months than the past 6 years combined. So things are accelerating there. So yeah, that was what I was talking about with the rumors about Facebook moving the targeting option. It's not a rumor. They are making everybody use that advanced detailed targeting option, with basically targeting expansion turned on. So the best way to explain it is basically it's creating a lookalike of whatever targets you select. So if you select E.L. James, then it's basically like, hey, people like E.L. James, people who like E.L. James, and people like E.L. James meaning people who Facebook thinks are like Yale James. So when you make a lookalike of, say, your page engagement, it's people who are similar to people who have engaged with your page. And as anyone knows who has tracked that with the attribution links, that's very hit or miss depending on the underlying data sample and just how Facebook has assembled that lookalike. So again, I think it's going to work pretty well with the sales ads. TBD on that. Obviously, track your numbers and be aware of how they compare to what you were doing previously. But I think Facebook, they can dial that in pretty well because the pixel sends them data on who's converting and who's achieving the target objective that you have with the sales ads. But with the traffic ads, they'll send you traffic of people who click, but I don't know if that traffic is going to be as targeted toward book buyers and readers as we want it to be. So we could do that pretty well with the traffic ads despite their limitations before, but it's going to be tough. So open targeting, yep, it is looking at the data collected on your account. So basically, especially with the sales ads, you're training your pixel over time, and then Facebook gets much better at targeting stuff. With the traffic ads, I don't know how much that plays into it, to be honest. It probably does, but you're not using the pixel, so you're not training it to the same degree. So, how often are you refreshing these ads to a Big Six audience? So with scaling in particular, I'd say that if you guys want to set and forget with the ads, then probably you're going to hit a max of like $50 to $100 a day on Facebook specifically. And then maybe you have to create ads once a month, or maybe you have to create ads once every 3 months, or they can just kind of hang out there. It depends on how efficient they are at the beginning, which is really a function of how good your cover and blurb are. If your cover and blurb convert really well, then the ads have a much longer runway before you have to refresh them because they're converting better at the start. And usually you're using some of those elements in the ad creative itself. So the ads start at a lower CPC as well. If you want to scale beyond $100 a day, then you really have to ramp up the testing significantly with the creatives. And that's just a question of like, hey, how much do I want to be in the Facebook Ads Manager, running ads, making ads in Photoshop or Canva or whatever, BookBrush, making the attribution links, because you definitely want to use the attribution links if you're running ads to Amazon. That data is going to tell you which ads perform best, and there's really no reason to test a bunch of ads if you can't tell how they're converting, because that's half the information missing. The other half being CPC, which you get automatically, but you need the attribution link to get the conversion. If you want to scale beyond $100 a day, then I would recommend probably being in there once a week, create 25 creatives a week, and saying, Nick, that is a lot of creatives. How am I going to do that? Well, I'll tell you. What you can do is you create 5 images, and you can do that with Canva pretty quickly, or they can be stock photos or something like that. One nice thing about romance is that you can find a lot of stock photos that are applicable to the book very easily. I would put the book cover on them to start. You can do a mix. One of the nice things with the attribution links is that you can track it. So if a stock photo isn't converting, which they often do not, then you can just get rid of that. And then you have 5 images, and then you have 5 pieces of copy. So you can have your blurb, and then a couple excerpts, and then a couple teasers, which are just short 1 to 2 sentence, 3 sentence type of teasers. And they have conflict in them. They're kind of like, he's a billionaire, she's a whatever. Plucky.
Sent to destroy his company.
Yeah, she's the plucky.
And a werewolf.
Eco warrior or whatever. And she stopped his development before they fall in love or whatever. Everyone's going to read this book. Don't worry, it's coming out next year. It's a great one. It's my next project. So, that type of thing, like where you have some conflict, you introduce the protagonist and the the antagonist, if you're not writing romance, obviously if those are romance, then it's going to be hero, heroine, pretty much, and what threatens to keep them apart. That's the format there. So really 3 sentences a lot of the time is what you're looking at, but can be fewer. And you just have 5 of those. So they could be all teasers, they could be all excerpts. Excerpts tend to work really well. If you write Steamy, please read your excerpts before you upload them. Make sure that they're PG-13 or less, not Dark Knight PG-13 where it's borderline R and you're like, what can I get away with? That's a terrible way to run Facebook ads. That's a good way to end up in Facebook ads jail. As a romance author, you definitely don't want to end up in Facebook ads jail if you can avoid it, because Facebook is going to be your best platform in 9 out of 10 instances for 9 out of 10 books. There are isolated occurrences where it's like the Amazon ads just crush for this specific book. Amazon ads are really difficult to run well for the romance books because the bids are so high. They're starting at really like $1 plus, and that's just not going to work unless you have a long series. So yeah, with the creative, just make sure with the excerpts that you're pulling, scrub anything that's an expletive. If you have a sex scene, don't use that. If you have the couple touching or anything like that, just edit it down. Think of it more like a movie trailer rather than something that you have to maintain the exactness to the manuscript 1-to-1. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to give people a glimpse at something exciting in the book. So have some conflict there and try to end it on a cliffhanger. And really make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to get Facebook to get angry at you. So same thing with the images. With the images, the big thing is that if you have any sort of touching with couples, that's going to be really hit or miss. Any beds, Facebook doesn't like beds. Don't put people on beds. They're a lot more accepting of dudes showing skin than women. So you want to make sure that the women are fully clothed, and definitely don't have 2 people in it, like man and woman with their shirts off or both showing skin. Facebook's not going to like that at all. I would tend to avoid the couples for the most part. You can do just fine with just the men. Images of women don't tend to convert as well. Remember that your target market is women, so they're going to be attracted to pictures of hot dudes. So it's not that complicated in terms of the images there, but you do want to make sure that you're abiding by Facebook's guidelines and not jumping into hot water by accident. You can try images with couples in them. They can perform quite well. You just have to find things that are compliant, which can be difficult. There are a lot of things that would work well if Facebook would let you run it, and people lament that and try to fight Facebook. You're battling Skynet. Like, you're arguing with an AI algorithm. You're not going to win. There's no reason to do it. Just try to avoid problems. 1, so you don't get banned. 2, if you're scaled up for a launch or scaled up in general and all your ads get shut off, then you lose all that momentum that you've built. So during a launch, that can ruin the launch pretty quickly if you're not pretty skilled at the ads and can adjust course. And if you've spent months working on these ads on Facebook and testing things and refining them, and then Facebook shuts them all off because they weren't compliant, then that was essentially a waste of your time. So just make sure that they're compliant. I think a lot of people are coming at it from the angle of, what can I get away with? That's not a good angle. Just run things that Facebook won't bother you about, and your life is going to be much easier. If only because then you don't have to talk to Facebook support, which is terrible. So
I had a question about ad set structure. Somebody said, and I think this was inspired by the fact that when you have purchase ads running, the pixel will put the set into learning. And if you don't get enough sales, it will put it into learning limited, which means they don't like your ads. And then she said, well, you know that Facebook kind of reads your ads as a set, and seemed to hint that if you have a winner in one ad set, it might not be a winner in another ad set, which just doesn't sound right to me. But there was something about like treating your ads as a set. And when I test, I have a testing campaign and then I'm pulling them out, putting them into a different set. And that was my only consideration. Like, I mean, I'm testing like 25 ads at a time, which is a great way to get a winner, guys. You will not know which one it is. Just make 25 ads. Don't think about it. Just do it.
Yeah.
In Canva. But yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good question there. And talks about like some of the ways that Facebook works in general. So one, learning limited, you're probably not going to encounter this with the traffic ads, because what Facebook is saying is, hey, like either this ad doesn't have enough impressions where you need like 500 impressions for the ad itself to learn, like each ad to learn. I think learning limited only applies to the ad sets where you're going to see that message, but the ads are learning too, like individually. So learning limited means that you haven't gotten 50 conversion events on that ad set. So that means 50 clicks on the traffic ad. If you're running something to like say the big six stuff, your CPC to start out with at like $25, $50 a day is probably going to be around 20 cents. If it's above 20 cents and you're spending less than $50 a day, you probably have a problem with your ad creatives and you want to test more ad creatives. Unless you've just spent tens of thousands of dollars to that book, then it's going to be fatigued and you're going to experience higher CPCs. But if it's like the first time you've ever run ads to that book, you probably want the ads to be running at 20 cents or less in romance to that big six audience there. But basically, with the traffic ads, getting back to Lee's question, it's not an issue to get 50 clicks at 20 cents a click. That's $10. However, to get 50 conversions, like sales conversions, you might be having to run, if your cost per sale on Facebook is $10, which would be pretty good in a lot of instances, I would say. That's $500 right there of ad spend. So if you're spending $50 a day, you're looking at that for 10 days. And Facebook might not be able to get enough data. Say you have two ad sets all of a sudden and you're spending that amount and you do get 50 conversions, but they're split between the ad sets, then Facebook can't learn properly. So that is an issue where Facebook can't get enough data from the pixel on who is completing that conversion event. So there are two options there. One, you can increase the budget. So you're basically going to get more conversions for the budget, and then Facebook's going to learn better because it has more data. And then the second thing that you can do is you can choose an event that's further up the funnel. What do I mean by that? Well, you have this chain of micro conversions as people go through your direct sales funnel. And if you're on Amazon and only selling on Amazon, you don't have to worry about this. But on the direct sales, like when someone hits your Shopify site, them viewing that page is like basically the first part of the kind of Facebook conversion funnel. That's a view content. So you could optimize for view content instead of the sale. Like you could tell Facebook rather, hey, like my conversion event is view content. That's not really all that correlated with buying. So maybe you want something that has more purchase intent. So you could go over to view checkout or add to cart. Those are two common ones that you could use instead. So it would be view content, and then it would be add to cart. That would be the next one. And then view checkout would be the closest one to a sale without actually being a sale. And that way you can feed Facebook more data and train it who you want it to show the ads to, meaning the sales ads. This doesn't apply at all to the traffic ads, so don't worry about it if you're running traffic ads. And that way you can get a lot more conversions with a lower budget. So you might have only 25 sales for, let's just keep with the same example. You have two ad sets and you have 50 sales split between them. So you have 25 each for $500 over that 10 days. You might get 3 times the number of people viewing the checkout, or you might get 5 times, you might get 20 times. It depends on how well your checkout page is working. So all of a sudden now Facebook has way more data to work with, because if you're getting 20 times more people viewing the checkout than actually, buying it, which probably would be a problem. I'm not super familiar with the e-commerce metrics, but I think 5%, if you check out 5% of people reaching the checkout actually converting and buying the book at that point once they have their credit card out seems like a problem. But just for the sake of example, then you have 1,000 events that you're sending to Facebook, and it's just way more data that it can work with and use to target your ad. So what Facebook's doing is that they get that data back from Shopify, and it says, hey, this person bought the book, or in this case, viewed the checkout. I'm going to go find more people like that. But it can only find more people like that and refine its sample size and refine the targeting of who it's showing the ads to if it has enough people, enough data coming back. So that's what the learning limited means. I think it's something you generally want to try to avoid if you're running the sales ads. If the performance is fine, don't worry about it. Usually I think the performance is going to be all over the place because Facebook doesn't have enough data. And you'll see the performance be much more volatile if you have, say, like it's learning limited and it only has like 5 conversions or something, versus whether it's closer to that 50 mark, because it just doesn't have enough data to work with if you only have like 2 sales a week or something. So for a lot of people, it means they're not going to increase the budget. What they're going to do is they're going to choose a conversion event that is a little bit easier to get more conversions for. So view checkout, add to cart. I probably wouldn't use view content unless you absolutely have to, but view checkout or add to cart, have some purchase intent. Another one is entered payment information. So I think that's another one that you can use as well. And that would be a step beyond view checkout in that chain, like right next to them actually buying it. And then the other part of that question was, hey, is a winner in one ad set, it's not necessarily going to be a winner in another ad set. So this is actually true because each ad set has its own history. So each ad set learns and has its own way that it basically accumulates data, and it can learn in different ways than the other ad sets. Same with campaigns as well. Like one campaign could be performing really well for the book and have the same ads in it as another campaign that's not performing as well, especially with the sales ads where Facebook's getting a lot more data, but you see this too with the traffic ads to a lesser extent, but it's still there. And what can happen is you can duplicate a winning ad into a new campaign or a new ad set, and its performance can drop. However, there is a caveat here in that if the performance replicates, then what you know is it wasn't the algorithm that dictated that performance, meaning the Facebook algorithm. Like it wasn't how Facebook learned, and it didn't just find the exact right pocket of people for that. What it means is that ad creative, there's something about it that's actually good. So that's a really good test for, hey, is this ad creative good? And what elements can I reverse engineer here that are working well? Because something that replicates over and over again, no matter what you do to it on Facebook, then you can be really confident that it's not the Facebook algorithm that's dictating that performance. It's something with the image, copy, headline, usually a combination of those, that is working well. And then you can identify those patterns and use them going forward. So if something isn't replicating in another ad set, that's fine. You can still run it in the original ad set. Hey, look, if it's performing well on Facebook, keep running it. It doesn't have to replicate every time that you run it. You can just run the original and just turn the other ones off. But that should be a signal that, hey, this means that something about the creative isn't necessarily universally resonating. It's probably something to do with how this particular ad set or ad learned or campaign learned to begin with. And that's totally fine. But if you just see the same creative crushing over and over again, no matter what campaigns you're copying into, it's a really good opportunity to sit down and be like, all right, what exactly is working here and how can I extract those principles and use them for my creatives going forward? Because Facebook is a creative driven platform, and that's becoming more and more and more the case over time. They're taking away a lot of the targeting options. They're taking away a lot of the other options. One thing that may happen next year, it looks like they're leaning toward this, is that they may take away the option to select what placements that you can choose. They've hidden it now. It's very difficult to find. They have done that on purpose. Facebook's engineers are very, very smart, and they have probably the best software engineers in the business there. So they didn't just accidentally hide all those options on the interface. Like, that's on purpose. I think that suggests to me is that they're going to take away the option to target by like newsfeed only, for example, because their AI is really good with the sales ads at finding people who are going to take that objective that you laid out. With the traffic ads, this may be hit or miss and may kind of result in some big problems there. But TBD on that. I'm not gonna like predict one way or another. Just test with the data and see what's going on. But
you heard it here first.
Yeah, we'll see. My cover is borderline. Should I avoid using it in my ad? Yeah. Like, everyone can make their own decisions in terms of risk tolerance. I think that it's vastly preferable to run Facebook ads to not being able to run Facebook ads in romance. Just your cost per sale or your cost per unit if you're in Kindle Unlimited, which is just your cost per sale or borrow. Like, I'm including the borrows in that calculation in Kindle Unlimited. It's just going to be so much lower than on Amazon. It's just a math thing, which I can pull up a sheet here to run through that quickly, just to illustrate how big of a gap we're talking about here. But it's just like, people think that there's some way to avoid that like math crunch that you find yourself in. It's like, oh, what about tactics that I can use on Amazon, or tricks or whatever? There's no secret trick or anything. Basically, I've run Amazon ads for some of the biggest romance authors out there. Unless it was a launch scenario, I wouldn't work with people who didn't have 5 books in a series, because the price of a click was so high that it didn't matter how good their cover or their blurb was, or how big their fan base was, or how good of a writer they were. The numbers just almost never worked, like 99% of the time. And if they did, it's like, okay, you're spending all this time and all this money dialing in the Amazon ads. Facebook would work probably 2-3 times better. So it's like all this effort for not even half the overall reward. It'd be like a tenth of the reward or something. So all right, we got Firefox here. So you got 3 elements to your ad costs or your ad performance. You have your CPC, which is your traffic, and then you have your conversion, which is, I just call this total conversion. So if you're wide, then it's going to be just your sales conversion. If you're in Kindle Unlimited, then this is going to be sales plus borrows divided by clicks here. So and this is tracked with the attribution links. And then we have profitability, which is what I call revenue per sale and revenue per borrow. In other materials, you'll see these referred to as read-through value and sell-through value. So those are synonymous. And that's just how much you make when you factor, that's how much you make for a sale of book 1 or a borrow of book 1 when you factor in sales or borrows of the rest of the books in the series. So, if your book is $2.99 and someone buys it, you make about $2, $2.10. But if you have a really long series, like say, like you have 10 books in the series, you might actually make 10 or 12 or $15 or whatever, depending on how many people end up buying the rest of the books. So you make a lot more. And this is really what dictates your overall scalability, both on Facebook and Amazon. But this is really what dictates whether you can run the Amazon ads at all, because of the costs here. So let's say your CPC, total conversion, and then we have what's called cost per unit. Your CPC on Facebook is, realistically, you can get 20 cents pretty easily, even if you're just starting out in romance. Again, if you're spending like $50 a day or less, that's a reasonable target. You could probably get it to 10 cents in a decent number of instances, 10 to 15 cents, depending on the book. Maybe, I think 10 cents would be difficult for a lot of books to achieve. Like that's something where if you're getting that and you have your cover on the ad, then you know that your cover is pretty dialed in. So with some testing, you can potentially get it down there. But certainly somewhere between like 15 to 20 cents is realistic at $50 a day, without having some super ninja tactics that you need or anything like that. And then Facebook tends to convert at 1 to 5% for a full price book. So let's just split the difference and say this ad is converting at 3%. Okay. So then your cost per unit, and this is just the cost of a sale or borrow. So I'm using a Kindle Unlimited example, works exactly the same way if you're wide or selling direct. You just obviously don't have borrows. So this is going to be your CPC divided by your conversion rate here. So we're at 666. By the way, another way to calculate cost per unit or cost per sale, you have CPC divided by conversion, or you have ad spend divided by units. And units are sales plus borrows. Again, if you're wide or direct, then it's just ad spend divided by sales. So the whole name of the game is to get this cost per unit number lower than your revenue per sale. Like, so in this instance, if you're making $8 for each sale, then you'd be profitable. If you're making $3, then you're bleeding money. And this is largely just a function of how long the series is. Getting back to why I mentioned the 5 books thing. At 5 books, you're probably sitting somewhere between $6 to $8 in read through and sell through value. So what that means is that you have some headroom to scale up, either with the Facebook ads or, in my instance, with the Amazon ads. You actually have the headroom to feasibly run them at all profitably. Because here on the Amazon side, if we do this equation, what we have is your bid is starting really at 70 cents minimum on Amazon in romance. If you bid lower, then you're going to get like 2 clicks a month. There are exceptions to that. It's really rare to get anything to serve under 70 cents. And a lot of the time, especially in something like contemporary romance, where you're trying to target popular books or popular authors, you're looking at $1 plus a click. So we can see right off the bat, okay, our CPC is 3.5 times what it is on Facebook. Now, your conversion rate is higher on Amazon, somewhere between 8 to 15% for a full price book. That would be like a good conversion rate. It can be lower, for the record. Your book could be converting at 3% on Amazon. It's not a guarantee that's going to convert well, but if the book works, then we're looking at around 8% to 15%. Let's split the difference, just call it 12. So in this instance, okay, we have 583 and 667. So you're saying, okay, Nick, this is a dumb example. You just contradicted yourself. Well, there's one factor here. At 70 cents, you're probably not going to be able to spend $50 a day. At 20 cents on Facebook, you could probably spend 50, 100, maybe even 200, 250 a day. And at 70 cents, there are books that literally won't even serve at 70 cents. There are some books that I have to set the bids at in romance to $1.12, $1.20 to get them to serve like really any appreciable amount. So really, this is best case scenario to get the ads to serve at all, and a lot of them won't. And if anyone's writing in other genres, say thriller or pretty much any genre, you're going to be constrained by this as well. The only genres where this isn't the case are nonfiction, depending on the genre, and children's and middle grade, where you can get a lower CPC on Amazon, set the bids much lower, and still get them to serve. But pretty much any fiction genre where you're targeting adults, you're gonna really be at 70 cents as the absolute minimum there. But realistically, you're probably looking at $1. And then we start to see the numbers move. Here's the other thing on the Amazon ads. You don't have much control over this CPC. You're saying, well, Nick, I can set the bid, so I have way more control on Facebook. That's true. But again, Amazon, if you set the bid at 20 cents, they're just not going to serve your ad. So you have control, but you need the ads to serve to actually spend money and scale up or just actually run ads. So you have limited control over that. On Facebook, you can test. So let's say your ad starts out at 20 cents. And I mentioned that you can get it down to 15, right? So you do some rounds of testing here and you get that down to 15. And all of a sudden, this is a really big gap, okay, in performance. But maybe we also get the conversion up to 4% there through testing. And then this ad is now twice as efficient. With Amazon, you do have control of the conversion because what you do is you test keywords and you test targets like auto ads and Kindle category ads, and then you remove the ones that aren't working well. So your conversion rate can increase over time because you're just focused on the best targets there. But you can't pull this lever really on Amazon at all with the CPC. And that's the constraining factor. And it's just so high that realistically, it's very difficult to make the numbers work. There's no way really to get it much lower than about $4.5, $5 at any sort of scale. And this would be like an absolute best scenario. Your book would be crushing it. Here on Facebook, you could have 12 cents and 4% conversion. That would be pretty good, but it wouldn't be like, this is the best ad ever. It would be up there in terms of performance, but you know, we could go to 10 and 5 and that would probably be at the top, and we can just see how much cheaper it is. So let's say you have a standalone, right? Like this would potentially be profitable. If you're priced at $4.99, you're making $3.40, that would work. Here, you're already underwater in the best case scenario. And maybe if it's like a launch, you can use all the sales and borrows you're pushing via the ads to activate the algorithms. But still, you'd probably rather spend $2 here than the $4.67 if your goal is to buy visibility and activate the algorithms. So the Amazon ads, if you're scaling up really aggressively, they can be this secondary player. With the romance books, if you have fewer than 5 books in the series, that's what I'm talking about right now. Like they can be useful as a supplement to Facebook, but you don't generally want them to be the primary player. And honestly, they're not worth running at all in a lot of instances unless you're trying to scale aggressively if you have fewer than 5 books, because you're probably just losing money by doing it. One myth that I see a lot of people think that they have to run Amazon ads for visibility on Amazon. They're saying, hey, that's where my customers are. Amazon and Facebook are 2 of the most popular websites in the world, and certainly in the US, right? So you're going to reach everybody in the US by advertising on Facebook, who the Venn diagram of Facebook users and Amazon users is pretty much just the same circle. You're not missing out on the Amazon customers there. The Amazon ads do help you reach the KU readership a bit better, I would say, than Facebook, just because Amazon's a KU product. So you're putting your ads right in front of Amazon readers. I don't know if people's goal should be, as a long-term business owner, to really build your KU readership. There are some advantages to that, but KU is Amazon's product. It's not your product. And a lot of those readers aren't necessarily super author loyal. They're interested in books in the program. And if your books are in the program, then they'll read them, but a lot of them won't necessarily follow you wide or direct sales or buy the books if they're not in Kindle Unlimited, which is totally fine. It's just a different reading audience. Then customers who are going to buy your book for $6 or $9 or whatever. So just be aware of that. a lot of times people think that they're building an audience in KU, and they are to an extent, but it's not an audience that will follow them other places as their career evolves and grows. So yeah, that's why basically the Amazon ads don't usually work all that well for romance books in particular. The bids are just really expensive. And again, you're usually looking at $1 for this. So even this, where it's converting at 15%, like it's tough to make the numbers work. Facebook's much more forgiving in terms of the numbers. So that's where I'd start there. And just to follow up what I was talking about with the 5 images and 5 pieces of copy and how you get 25 different ads out of that. Basically what you do is you create these, right? And then you make sure that you run them with every other piece of creative that you made there. So you have an ad here with copy 1 and image 1, and then copy 1 runs with image 2, copy 1 runs with image 3, and so forth. So you're just, you're getting a lot more creatives for your time and energy, but B, you're also seeing how these perform with one another, because copy 1 may be a really, really good fit with image 1. You know, maybe it's talking about a billionaire and you got a guy in a suit here with image 1. And then, you know, copy 1 is talking about a billionaire, like we're still talking about copy 1. And then image 2 is a picture of some dude walking his dog. And those two things aren't that congruent, and that ad sucks. So it allows you to test each piece of copy and each image with a wider range of options. And that's useful as well, because sometimes you can rule out something that would work pretty well with like 4 other images. It's just that the one image that you tested that piece of copy with wasn't a good fit at all. So the traditional way that you test is like, maybe you start with images, like you might start with 5 or 10 images. Right, and then we go over here to, let's do 5, just to keep it same. And then maybe let's say image 4 is the best. So you test image 4 then with 5 pieces of copy, and you go through this process, and this works really well, don't get me wrong. But here, we're not testing every combination, and we made 5 images and 5 pieces of copy, right? So we're making the same number of creative elements. What happened, however, was we tested 5 images, and then we tested 5 pieces of copy, right? So we tested 10 total ads. Here we tested 25 ads.
Nick, is this all one campaign, one ad set?
Yeah, you can just throw them all into the same ad set. And then what you can do is, once the testing is wrapped up, you can then make a new ad set for the second round of testing and so forth for organizational purposes. Okay. I think Facebook has a limit of 50 ads in a single ad set, so you can't just like keep throwing stuff in there.
Gotcha.
And how you get Facebook to give them an even number of clicks is you set a rule on Facebook. It's in the middle of the Facebook screen there. If you're on like a MacBook Air or something with a smaller screen, then you may have to hunt for that, but it's always in the middle of the screen. Like it's not, the label on the rules might not like show up as rules. It's still there. It's just you know, for space constraints, sometimes it's not fully labeled. But basically, you can set a rule to tell Facebook to turn off the ads after they get a certain number of clicks. So up here, I would set these to 30 clicks if you're using this strategy where you're pairing them all off. Down here, if you're using this strategy, I would do 100 clicks. Why the difference? Well, here you get a lot more data on each piece of copy and each image. So you actually end up with 150 clicks each. So you get a pretty good sample size across everything. Like if you're trying to figure out like, hey, what piece of copy worked best or what image worked best. Down here, if you do 30 clicks, then you're only getting 30 clicks on each image or each piece of copy, you know. So you set that a little bit higher. So either of these can work. This works really well. And if you're using a different testing system here, this process where you're just taking like 5 images and then you take the best image and then you take the best copy, or you test copy with the best image, and you just keep going through it over and over again, basically just iterating through until you have the performance that you want. That works pretty well. This will be more efficient from an ad spend perspective. You're going to get better data. You're going to get better performance. It's also faster because you don't have to create as many creative elements to keep the fire stoked. So it's very rare that you get all 4 of those at once. Usually you're making some sort of concession where you're moving to a different testing process. But here it just absolutely crushes this across the board, which is nice to see, but this is effective.
I'm sorry, Nick, I got confused about the rule because aren't you testing for who gets the most amount of clicks fastest? Wouldn't that be the winner?
Meaning, does the rule test that way, or is that,
No, I'm sorry.
should that
So
be the way that you test?
You said to do the rule and stop at 30 clicks, but then how do I know out of those 5 which is the winner? What metric am I looking at?
Oh, okay. Once you have your 30 clicks, so the reason we use 30 clicks is because Facebook tends to direct the budget toward one of the ads in particular. We've all seen this where it's like, okay, this ad has 400 clicks and then the rest of them have 6 combined. So it'll turn off that one that's hogging the budget and then allow the others to get the budget, because Facebook only knows what the CPC is. So it's optimizing like for the most clickable ad there and what it thinks might get the best CPC. That's not going to align necessarily with what ad has the best conversion. So on our end, we have to bring in the attribution data, right, to calculate our cost per unit over here.
Just the attribution.
So yeah, we need the total conversion from the attribution data. So that's what we need to bring in. And then the winner is going to be the ad or the ads with the lowest cost per unit, or just a cost per unit that's below our target. So in this instance, right, where we had, let's say our revenue per sale is $8, which is again sell-through value, and then let's say our revenue per borrow, which is read-through value, is 6, because usually the revenue per borrow is a bit lower. Usually you're making a bit less in KU than you are with sale. Then your target, if you were trying to break even, would be $6 or less. So I just take the lower of these numbers to be conservative. You could average them together, so you could say 7, but if I'm being conservative, then I'm going to say 6. So I would want my target cost per unit to be $6 or less for the ads. And then I would look at all these ads and be like, okay, maybe this one and this one or whatever, and this combination, maybe those fit the bill. Usually it's going to fit like an 80-20 distribution where maybe 20% of the ads really work well. And so that's 1 in 5. So one of the nice things is that if you test 25 ads, you can realistically get like 3, 4, 5 winners. You might get 0. There are plenty of times you get 0. You can get more potentially, but you're basically just trying to find things that are below your cost per unit. And then the next step is that to run them, you can transfer them to another campaign. And one, this confirms that they're actually winners, getting back to Lee's question earlier, like if it replicates in a different campaign, that there's something about the creative that's working. 2, just for organizational purposes, that works really well. Just because you can scale up that winners campaign, and you also know where your winners are at any one moment. So if you're looking for inspiration for similar ads, like, hey, I want to make some ads and iterate on the stuff that I've already done, and you know where to find them as well. So what it ends up being is you have a testing campaign, and then you have a winners campaign. And then you're just transferring things from the testing campaign over to the winners campaign. But I can show you guys some data, like how this works in terms of like, okay, the combinations. If anyone's interested here, let me see what the
I do have 10 more minutes on my count for me, but I can make you the host.
Yeah, I can show it in like 5-10 minutes.
Okay. You do have some questions. Monica asked, are we talking about a creative dynamic ad? And with the test rule, Monica, it would be your own pairings with a rule applied. And she also asked how much would we spend per ad using this testing metric.
Okay, so yeah, this is just regular single ads. What you can do with the single ads is you can see you're using an attribution link for each of these, so you can see what the cost per unit is for each of them. With a dynamic creative ad, you can only use one link. So you'd use an attribution link for that dynamic creative ad, but you couldn't see the conversion for the individual elements. And you also don't have control over what the individual elements that get served together are. So it ends up being way more expensive to test with dynamic creative. I've done this with dynamic creative before. And again, like I've scaled books really aggressively with dynamic creative. So dynamic creative, you can definitely use that to test and then pull out the best performing elements. You know, you look at the breakdown and you say, hey, this one's like 7 cents and this one's 8 cents. And I'm going to take those and assemble them as a regular ad. That's the process with dynamic creative. And it works. This is much better. So I can't seem to find my sheet on how to calculate the profitability of a series or whatever it's called. So if anybody wants some tracking templates, which is everyone loves tracking. We have nicholaserik.com/tracking, and that will have, I can actually show you because I'm on the internet. What a time to be alive.
You are the host now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll wrap this up in a few minutes so you can go. So once you make a copy, you can come in here to this sheet, and that will be a place where you can store those revenue per sale and revenue per borrow numbers for the future. And it also just tells you what numbers you need. So the actual equation for revenue per sale and revenue per borrow is total series sales revenue divided by book one sales. That's revenue per sale. And then revenue per borrow is total series AU revenue divided by book one borrows. So those are the actual equations there. And those will get you to the same place as those sell-through calculations that you may have seen, where it's like you take the percentage of, like the sell-through percentage and multiply it all out and everything. This will get you to the same place. It's just way faster. It's also more accurate. So that's a nice benefit as well, but it's also faster. How much are you spending per ad on this? Let's say we have 30 clicks. And then our CPC is 20 cents. Again, at $50 a day in romance, I think you can get that a bit lower realistically, but we'll just use that to be conservative. You're spending $6 an ad. So somewhere between $6 to $10 an ad. And then we have 25 ads. This would cost you $150 to test. Down here at 100, let's use the same metric here. CPC is 20 cents. We have $20 per ad. We're testing 10 ads, so it would cost us $200 to test 10 ads with this method. So we can see here that this one's cheaper. We get a lot more data because we're getting 150 clicks for each of these. And, it's just going to be better overall. So, all right, let me see here. I'm going to wrap things up. If anyone has any last questions, I will show you what this kind of process looks like here. Okay, I'm back. And when we switched the host on the call, it stopped recording. So I'm just going to discuss what we talked about after the recording stopped. So the power of that 5x5 approach where you're testing each of the images with each piece of copy is that you can get a lot more creatives out of the elements that you make. So you don't have to create as many images. You don't have to come up with as many pieces of copy. And that cuts down on the time and energy that you have to invest into making creatives. And you also get better performance because it might be the case that copy 1 doesn't perform well with image 1, but crushes it with images 2 through 4 or 2 through 5. And if you only test copy 1 with image 1 and then discard it because it doesn't perform well, then you're potentially missing out on something that would be effective. So it cuts down on time. It's going to be more accurate. It's going to yield better performance. Overall, it's a better approach than, say, testing 5 images, taking the best one, then testing 5 pieces of copy, taking the best combo, and going through things like that. That's still a totally valid approach, and it works well. It's just that this works better. And once you find the images and copy combinations that work well, say image 1 plus copy 3 or something, or let's actually use the best performer here. So image 4, maybe image 4 plus copy 4 or copy 8. Those are the 2 best ones. Maybe those perform really well together. And then you could iterate further on that and test more pieces of copy with image 4 and more images with copy 8 to try to lower the overall cost per unit here. So this is some data from an actual box set where the launch is ongoing, and I'm going to show you some of the best performing images and pieces of copy in a second, but just basically to go further with this 5x5 idea, in theory, since there are 9 images and 10 pieces of copy that have been tested thus far, that would be 90 total possible creatives. You don't necessarily have to test everything with everything, and in practice that tends to not be what happens because you're not necessarily creating all the creative elements at once. Things burn out, and then you create more pieces of copy and images as needed, and you test them. So here have run a total of 27 unique creative combinations at this point, and that's still significantly more than 19. That's almost 50% more creatives. So it is still a big overall jump from what you would get if you were testing them sequentially with 10 images or whatever, and then 9 pieces of copy, or vice versa, since we have 9 images and 10 pieces of copy. So it is a big difference, and the more you test, the better your performance is going to be. This is why you test, because image 4 here is coming in at a cost per unit of 164. It's converting at 22%. And then our worst image here, image 8, is converting at 2.5% and 1569 as the cost per unit. And you want to make sure that you're looking at both the CPC and the total conversion, because those are going to be your 2 pieces in calculating cost per unit. So again, cost per unit is just CPC divided by total conversion. Total conversion is units divided by clicks, and units equals borrows plus sales. So if you're wide, then you're just looking at sales. That's the total number of units. So total conversion will just be sales divided by clicks. But when you're in KU, you want the borrows as well. And borrows equals the page reads divided by the KEMPC in the book. And that is just Amazon's term for the number of Kindle Unlimited pages. And how you track the page reads and sales coming from your ads is you use the Amazon attribution links, and each ad gets its own unique attribution link so that you can compare the performance. So since 27 unique ads ran here, that means that there were 27 unique attribution links created, so we could see how the page reads and sales stacked up for the various ads and how they were converting. And then the idea is simple, where you just turn off the ads that are above your cost per unit. So you have your target cost per unit, and anything above that, you turn that off. So here the target is 3. So quite a few of the creative elements are coming in below $3, and some of them are coming in above, but certain combinations involving, say, copy 3, even though on average it's at 334, maybe one or two of the creatives is actually below that. So you'd keep the variants that were working and then eliminate the ones that weren't. And over time, you're just basically directing more of your budget toward the ads that are working, and your ads hopefully improve in performance. Or if you're scaling up and spending a lot of money, then that allows you to stave off ad fatigue for longer and maintain reasonable performance for longer. If you're really pushing the budget aggressively, then it's hard to keep CPCs low, conversion rates decent for a long time. So the game is that you're coming in and making new creatives and trying to keep the CPCs reasonable and the conversion rates reasonable enough to continue running the ads. But at some point, if you're scaling aggressively where you're spending $500, $1,000, $2,000 a day on a book or something like that, then the cost per unit inevitably rises on you and at some point becomes too inefficient to run and you have to scale back. So let's take a look at some actual ads here to close things out, and that will illustrate just the gap in performance between some of the creative elements and also some of the combinations. So illustrating why that system is so powerful, where you combine each piece of copy and each image rather than testing them sequentially. Or you don't have to test all the combinations, but at least testing a decent number of them is going to yield better results. All right, so first off, one way to keep the images and copy and headlines organized is to use this coded naming convention. So that helps you not only organize everything, but also slice and dice the data. And that's going to require some spreadsheet skills there. You don't have to do that, but it is going to unlock insights into your data that are otherwise really difficult to analyze. So the system is G for image, and you start at 100 and just count up across all the books on your account. And then headline is H100, copy is C100, and it's always in the order of G100, C100, H100. So image, copy, headline. If you're testing audiences, then that's coded as A100. And again, you just count up. So if book 1, you make 5 images for that, you have G100, G101, G102, G103, and G104, and then you switch to book 7, then you would just start counting at G105 for that book and keep counting up. So very simple. It does require spreadsheet skills, but even if you don't use spreadsheets all that often, keeping things organized in this fashion allows you to reference your past pieces of copy, your past headlines, and it gives you a central location to store them in, and that's really powerful. All right, and this is what that type of sheet looks like. I have tabs down here for creatives, and then the images, the copy, the headlines, and this gives you that central location where you can go and find a piece of copy that ran in the past or a headline. That's really useful. It saves time even if you're not going to use the spreadsheet for crunching all the numbers and storing all the data. Just having that location where you know everything is and it's easily accessible, that is very powerful. But obviously, when you bring the data into the equation and you start accumulating that over months and over the course of, now it's been a year since I've been using this system, you really start to see patterns and the data starts compounding in that you can unlock insights into what's working for your catalog that without storing the data in this fashion, they would be very difficult to ever spot. So This is powerful, and we can see that we have the CPCs here by the various creatives and can easily spot what's working and see how they're performing in comparison to one another in a single place. This is useful in that you can crunch this data by hand, or you can tie the spreadsheets together manually every time you do the analysis. But by just dropping it into one location where you have the Facebook data, it's automatically pulled in by Supermetrics or dataslayer. In this instance, using Supermetrics, that comes in every day. And then all that you have to do is copy and paste in the attribution data, and it does all the calculations automatically. And also, long term, you can store the data in a central location. So this type of key, it's been really tremendously helpful for seeing what creative elements are performing well, being able to reuse them going forward in the future, and sharpening the skills with the ads, because it's much easier to spot patterns and build on your work rather than sometimes going around in circles and reusing the same type of creative or piece of copy or headline that didn't ever really work, but you don't have all the data at your fingertips. And this prevents that type of problem, and also prevents the problem where we've had stuff that has worked well in the past. We've all had that experience, and then it gets lost on the Facebook dashboard or in some Word document somewhere, and it never gets used again. So anyway, a version of this template is included in the Scaling Mastery Pro course. If you're not into the codes and the spreadsheet looks overwhelming, then don't pick up the course. It's not going to be a good fit. You can totally use most of what we've talked about in this class to improve your ads without having any sort of advanced spreadsheet skills or diving into the data in this level of detail. But if you want to take things to the next level, then this is a great way of doing that. And you can build your own template, of course. It's going to take quite a bit of time, and this is something that I've troubleshooted and developed over working with a lot of different authors, so it's pretty effective at this point. Anyway, back to the presentation, and we'll talk about some of the worst and best performing creative elements. Okay, so this is why we test. Sometimes people question whether testing really makes a difference, or there's this mental argument where we know that testing is powerful, but we can talk ourselves out of it and try to convince ourselves that maybe it doesn't matter as much as we think. And it matters an enormous amount in terms of scaling the ads, or even if you're just trying to optimize the ad spend, which is what probably 99% of the people watching this, that's what I'd recommend, where you're really just trying to optimize the ad spend that you have, and you're not trying to scale it to thousands of dollars a day. That takes a lot of effort and a lot of time, and most people would probably prefer to use that time to write and do other things. But even if you're not trying to scale things really aggressively, this matters a lot, where you test enough to find what's working and direct more of the budget there. So we can see that the best image here produced a 164 cost per unit. That's 36 cents CPC, 22% conversion. And then the worst image produced a 1569 cost per unit, 40 cents CPC, 2.5% conversion. That means that the worst image was over 9.5 times more expensive. Now, the image on the right, that was one of the best performing images for the individual first book in the series. So because I'm using that sheet, I can easily reference the past performance of the ads and then reuse those elements in the future for not only that book, but potentially a box set like this, which is what happened. And that's a good best practice. Didn't work here, but still worth trying. And once you analyze this, obviously you'd want to shut this type of image off, because the cost per unit is massively more expensive than the image on the left,
On the left, we just have something simple where it's the book cover, and then as part of the book background, it's the top part of the book background. So it just looks nice from a visual standpoint, and then a review quote at the bottom. And the review quote that you use here is going to have a pretty significant impact on the performance. Haven't tested other review quotes here for this specific image, so I can't say how those stack up against one another, but it will definitely have an impact from past tests that have run. And then putting 99p on the image here very prominently. When you have a deal, this is a box set of 3 books, and they're discounted to 99p and 99 cents, then making that a prominent part of the creative is going to generally improve the performance. As we can see here, where we have just the cover-on-cover background, which tends to perform reasonably well, here it didn't, in comparison to the options where we have this little 99p sticker on the image, and those both just absolutely crushed the version which doesn't have the price on it. Cost per unit of $5.50 for just the cover-on-cover background, and then with the price, $185. Price plus a review quote, $181. I wouldn't say that that's statistically significant, but it does give a different visual feel and is another option there. And again, I think that the review quote here, that will have a big impact on the performance. Haven't tested other review quotes on this particular image, but that will have an impact on the cost per unit. So the best performing image out of those 3 that we just looked at was the one with the price tag and the review quote on it, just barely at $181, but nonetheless the best performer out of that group of images. Let's dive a little bit deeper and see, out of all the ads that have run with this image, what is the best version of that ad. So 3 different variants ran, and this was the best performer. We have our image here, and then headline, 3 British crime thrillers for 99p. Generally speaking, I find that the headline doesn't have a huge impact on the conversion and CPC. You can test some variants there to see if it does move the needle, but just basically stating the genre, making it clear that it's a book, and if you have some sort of deal, that's good to include. If your book is free in Kindle Unlimited, then something like funny rom-com, free in Kindle Unlimited, or new thriller, free in Kindle Unlimited, that would work fine. The best steamy romance I've read all year, if you have some sort of review quote like that, then that would work well in the headline. Just basically make it clear that it's a book and tell the reader what genre it is. That's the main things that I look for in the headline. I tend to find that the copy and the image have a much bigger impact on the conversion and the CPC. The copy here is just a simple teaser where we have the picturesque town of Market Harborough holds its secrets close, and that's a real town in the UK, so that's going to appeal to readers looking for that regional aspect to their mystery, crime, thriller novels. And then the second part is, and as Detective Sebastian Clifford soon finds, some are even worth killing for. Very straightforward, 2 sentences, but this is the best performer. 113 cost per unit, so significantly less than the overall average for this image, which again was 181. And then we can look at the worst version. Same headline, same image, so the only thing here that has changed is the copy. And this is actually the blurb. Usually the blurb performs pretty well. It might have been a little bit burned out at this point, or maybe it just wasn't a great fit for this particular creative, although it does fit well with the book cover since it's been tested with the book cover. So I think it might have just been some creative fatigue, and that's going to set in as you spend more and more money. So I won't read that out loud. You can pause the video and check that out. But suffice to say, pretty significant difference in performance here, where this is coming in at 333 cost per unit. The best version was coming in at 113 cost per unit, and on average, this image was returning a cost per unit of 181. So this is significantly more expensive than both the average and, of course, the best version. And this highlights why that testing approach, where you pair off each image and each piece of copy, is so powerful, because there can be a significant difference in the performance, even just changing the copy. That's the only thing that changed between these two. And this version of the ad had a 30-cent CPC, 26.7% conversion. This one had a 40-cent CPC and a 12.1% conversion. And then where the codes and the tracking sheet come into play is it allows you to spot patterns long term. So if this is the first ad that you've ran, or one of the first ads that you've run, then the takeaway could be that the blurb doesn't work very well and that you shouldn't run the blurb. From running a bunch of ads, I know that the blurb tends to convert pretty well on Facebook, so it's likely that the reason for the performance here is because the blurb has run a good amount for the box set, and it might just be a little bit fatigued, or it just might not have performed well in this specific instance. But the blurb generally performs well as a piece of ad copy on Facebook. So as you accumulate more data, you can see what the patterns are and what is just noise. It's easy to get one result like this and then never run a certain type of headline or piece of copy or image type again, and that would be a mistake, because sometimes those are really good general formulas or approaches for the creatives. They just didn't work that specific time. And the more data you have access to, the more you can see those patterns. So wrapping up here, the worst version, where again the only difference was the ad copy, it was almost 3 times more expensive than the best, coming in at 333 versus 113 for the best version. And the reason that we go through all this trouble of testing ads and analyzing them and turning off the ones that aren't working and optimizing things over time is that if you have $100 a day in ad spend, for example, the difference in units, which again is your sales plus borrows, being generated by your ads in this instance, would be 30 units a day for the worst one and 88 units a day for the best one. That's obviously a pretty massive gap in performance, and it may be the difference between the ads being worth running and them not being worth running at all. And remember that this is just the worst version of this particular image. The worst overall image returned a cost per unit of $15.69. So through testing, you find not only the best images and the best pieces of copy and the best headlines, but then you can find the best combinations, as we saw here, and further refine the results that you're getting. And the code key, the coded naming convention, the tracking sheet is going to make it easier to store those things over time and see those patterns. But it's something that you can do even if you're not tracking everything via the spreadsheet system there. The main takeaway is that you want to test your ads, track them via the attribution links, and then turn off the ones that aren't working so you can direct more of the ad spend toward what is actually generating sales and borrows of your books. And you want to make sure that you're testing, because there can be a pretty significant gap in the performance, and the more things that you test, the more you can find those creatives that are performing well. One final note here, the numbers that you see with the cost per unit and the conversion rate, those aren't going to be typical for a full price book. This is for a box set at 99 cents and 99p. For a regular full price book that's priced at $2.99 or higher, you're probably looking at 1 to 5% as your conversion rate on Facebook. In rare instances, the conversion rate can be a bit higher, but that's usually what you're looking at. And by conversion rate there, I mean total conversion rate between sales and borrows. So that's all I got here. Thanks for making it to the end of the replay, and hope that was helpful.